Hello and welcome to the No Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McDonald. With me, co-host Finn McDonald. Today is a list episode. We have two lists that we're going over. Finn's 50, we're going to go for first. Then we're going to go over the first 25 names of my top 100 that was released today on a kind of panic short video due to some government restrictions on CapCut. That have not been unbanned, unlike the very famous TikTok unbanning. CapCut is still banned. I don't know why. Whatever. We're in the position we are now. Finn's 50. Finn, you have accumulated a top 50 list for the upcoming season. This is the first full list you have ever made, correct? Or in a published manner, it's the first list that you've published?
Yes.
Okay. So, if you have anything quick before we go over the names, what was the process for you?
Honestly, didn't have a formula. I looked at the past two seasons, with a notable exception of somebody that won the Rookie of the Year. It was just insane.
Yeah. So, rookie tax, last 2 years, big emphasis on those. What was the weight between upside and consistency for you?
Consistency did matter a lot. There is a certain fish that got taxed heavily because of their health.
Yeah. Obviously, Mike Trout is the one you're referring to there. So, consistency, you would say, has a good bit more weight than upside, for you at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
It also has upside too, though.
Yeah, obviously everybody when they're making a top 50 list should be, doing some combination of upside and consistency.
Because my last guy got in there because he is consistent.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any other things you want to get out the way before we share this document and you open yourself up to a lot of criticism from, random people on the internet?
No.
Okay. We'll see. Somebody's always going to get pissed off. I'm going to share the screen to the document that you have sent me. I'll get off any questions that I have about it. I'll ask Finn after, and then we'll go over the list. Max Fried, Rafael Devers, Brent Rooker, Julio Rodriguez, Luis Castillo, Jose Altuve, Matt Olson, Ketel Marte, Wilson Contreras, Marcus Semien, Paul Skeens, Jackson Merrill, Anthony Santander, George Kirby, Tommy Edman, Pablo Lopez, Blake Snell, Tyler O'Neill, Garrett Cole, Corbin Burns, Hassan Kim, Christian Yelich, Brendan Nimmo, Zach Wheeler, Teoscar Hernandez, Cal Raleigh, Willie Adames, Alex Bregman, Ronald Acuna, William Contreras, Cody Bellinger, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, Mike Trout, Tarek Skubal, Adley Rutschman, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Jose Ramirez, Jordan Alvarez, Freddie Freeman, Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt, Corey Seager, Mookie Betts, Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, Aaron Judge, and at one Shohei Ohtani. All right. To start, Finn, are there any individual player rankings that you really wanted to make a statement with?
I think it's great in here. I mean, this guy had a 3.1 ERA or under, 7 seasons at this point.
Yeah. So that's why he really pushed into the list for you at 50, even though there's been some injury concerns with him.
Yep. That's why you got him there.
Okay. I guess just to start, I think, honestly, I very much agree with how the top 25 looks. Maybe not the same 25 names or the 25 names I have, but I understand them all being there, and I would order them probably a little bit differently, but I get the 26, Teoscar, Finn. Sell me on Teoscar.
Probably gonna give you 30 home runs and a 7.75 OPS minimum.
Okay. No quails about him defensively on your part, really.
I did have some quails, but like not as much quails as I would have had if I was looking at Sterling Marte in the outfield defensively.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of are looking at Starling Marte and the outfield defensively like it is actually kind of that bad. So, I mean, I understand the production from Teoscar. Like, I think a 770 is a pretty bad year for Teoscar, and I would say that's a very comfortable floor. Um, yeah, just maybe I'm not as high on what the ceiling is with him as you are. Like, what did you kind of have him in ceiling wise?
Feel like I had him at a low 9 OPS with like 40 homer season.
Okay, so yeah, probably also a little bit higher than I was ceiling wise. So you maybe saw him as a higher ceiling guy. Like honestly, a ceiling, not too dissimilar from like a Ronald Acuna at that point. So I see it.
I
Um,
I don't think he would be around Laguna because I think he could somehow do that with that 250 batting average. It would not be like Acuna's 2023.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Not saying I would have him there, but I understand the reasoning. Um, Just kind of a run of like a good bit of guys. You said you valued consistency. That's where you get, your Nimmo, Hassan Kim, uh, Tommy Edman, those type of guys. I understand that. Columbus starters. How are starters ranking for you, Fed? Because Tarek Skubal was your one, then you go to Wheeler at two, and then you kind of have a clump of guys with Burns, Cole, Snell, Lopez, Kirby. What was how did you feel on these starters? Were any like you were super passionate about how you had them?
Duball and Wheeler, I'm firm at being those two being one and two.
Okay,
For starters, anyway.
makes sense. And then I mean the Lopez one, you know, as the Pablo Lopez truther, and I was the high guy on him a year ago. You know, this is way higher than I would be comfortable going with on Pablo. Like, how do you feel on Pablo Lopez?
Honestly, I don't think he's hit his ceiling.
Okay, so you think
I
there's even
know he has great stuff. Now he just needs to not be walking guys as much as Pablo Lopez walks guys. That's
okay?
too high. That's killing us. And I feel like control is something that can be developed.
Yeah, Finn, I gotta check you there, man. Do you know what Pablo Lopez's walks per nine was a year ago?
Something like three.
It was 2.0.
Is it not just the walks though? It's the hit by pitches and the working himself into counts where he has to throw a get me over fastball. And guess what professional hitters do to get me over fastballs?
Yeah, I can see that. So you're saying he's falling behind count leverage a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, it's not so much only about the walks per nine, but it's, you know, getting ahead in more counts. And you think that's very possible year to year. Going to age 29 for him. Yeah, I could see that happen in Minnesota. Very yeah, they preach control over there with a lot of their pitchers, and they get the most they can out of stuff. So I could see it. Yeah, stuff's great though. 11K per nine and 23. 9.6 in a down year in 2024. FIP wise, he pitched to a 3.6 and what was a down season for him. So I understand the Pablo Lopez love. It's just this year was not the year for me to dish it out. But, he still had a 408 and a ton of innings pitched.
I'm over
But
there looking at that's the floor. That's not a bad floor.
yeah, a 2.5 WAR as a floor isn't a top 50 guy. But, if you think there's a lot more to tap into the ceiling, you know, if you think the ceiling's higher than a 3.3, which I think I would agree as well. Um, yeah, I see it. You just see the ceiling a lot more likely than me, is I think where we are on Pablo. Um, Rookies. Clearly, you had an emphasis on putting the two guys right next to each other. I traditionally always um, end up in a similar spot with a lot of rookies. If they have a really great season, um, they they get a rookie tax to them. You ended up with Skeens and Merrill in the opposite order at 39 and 40. Where I'm assuming this is just rookie tax, but anything else you want to add on in those two guys?
Could you repeat that? No, I missed it.
Um, Skeens and Merrill rookie tax was basically the question.
Honestly, with Skeens, we all remember Bryce Elder, right? How good his first half was. We haven't seen too much of his more of his sample size than that, so I have to take that with a grain of salt.
Okay. I mean, let me throw it this way for you though. Like Bryce Elder, it was easy to look at Bryce Elder's underlying metrics and say that it wasn't very sustainable. What to you points to Paul Skeens to being not sustainable?
I think it will be sustainable, but I have to see it before I'm moving it over guys that I've seen it from.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm just saying Bryce Elder probably isn't the best comparison
He was
because
just a comparison I thought of.
yeah, because Bryce Elder between the two halves was basically the same pitcher. It's just he got way luckier in the first half than he got in the second half. You're more so saying you want to see it for a larger sample for Paul Skeens, and I would agree. That's generally how I am rookie tax wise. And then you're in a similar spot with Merrill. For context, I was at 43 and 46 on Henderson and Corbin Carroll after their rookie seasons. Me personally, I had these two rookies a lot higher than those guys. I feel a little bit more confident about Skeens and Merrill than I have really compared to any other rookie that I've had to rank in my 4 years of ranking players. So that's how I felt about those guys. Um, we get to Semien, Wilson Contreras, Ketel Marte, Matt Olson, Julio Finn, really low in Julio. What's what's the word on Julio?
Honestly, I need to see that bat show up.
You said you need the bat to show up.
I need to see that bat show up like it did in I forget if it was 22 or 23 for me to be able to justify putting him over some of those guys, just war wise.
Yeah, 22 and 23 really he was over 800 OPS as a hitter. This season he was a 743. Um, you'll see based off of how I ranked Julio, I definitely had a lot more emphasis on the 22 and 23. I didn't really buy in that much on the down year with Julio. So I think that's more of an indifference in how we rank things. I understand where you come from, though. You're just going based off of the performance that we've seen the past couple of years. Has been a very good player, but not a superstar level player quite yet. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes.
All right. All right. Let's see.
Like I said, I did not take 2022 into my considerations.
Yeah. Which I understand. There's some, circumstances where I think it is important to take in that extra season. And then for me, when I rank things, I did take 22 into consideration. Not as heavy as the other two, but yeah. Tyler O'Neill, I guess, is the one big name that I saw here, and I was like, whoa, Tyler O'Neill fan. At 33, what's the Tyler O'Neill?
Honestly, like I said, I had a good emphasis on 24 season, and he had a great season in 24.
Okay. So you're not necessarily, you know, projecting as much as I think I am. You're mainly going based off of what production has already happened. From that circumstance, I do understand Tyler O'Neill being a guy who's ranked for you, for sure. Let me think. I mean, do you have anything else that you want to get off about your list?
Honestly, injuries matter. There's a certain starting pitcher that did not make the list. Spencer Strider. That's because he's gonna miss significant time, and I don't think a starter that can only pitch half of the season is a top 50 player.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going from there. So
And
there's some. So did you know about the Hassan Kim injury though?
that's what I was ranking.
Yeah, yeah. Hassan Kim's gonna miss like about a month or two. Um, it's kind of important, but I didn't actually
That
know
would have
about it.
moved him down a lot, but I think I would have still ranked him.
Okay, yeah. I guess that makes sense. Hassan Kim was a guy who, when I was ranking players, I was like, damn, this guy's consistent as hell, and there is some sneaky hidden upside with him. And I hope he goes to a good team.
He would have been sitting down there with Max Fried, though.
Yeah, at the back of the list. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's that certain fish that needs to prove that he's healthy. Like Trout is definitely a top 10 player when healthy. But at this point, I need to see him on the field healthy with my own eyes before I can say that.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, though, he was still 17th for you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's pretty high. So
I added that high because healthy, I would even argue he could be a top 5.
I wouldn't say that's extreme. So yeah, all right. You got any more comments?
Not now, but I think I'm going to have comments on the other stuff we're doing.
Okay, so I'll quickly pull it up on Instagram. I put up the uh, the first 25 names off of my top 100. I I hope this one's well received. This is the rationale episode, so if there's anything crazy uh, that goes on in reaction to this, this is where the answers are. All right, so to start I guess we'll read off the names. At 100 was Lars Nootbaar, who unfortunately gets cut off here. Holy shit. I didn't realize it did this. Yeah, 100 is Lars Nootbaar, Pete Alonso, Ozzy Albies, Seiya Suzuki, Andres Jimenez, Nolan Arenado, Zach Gallen, Garrett Cole, Eugenio Suarez, and then at 91 is Tanner Helk. At number 90, I gotta scroll down to 90. Um, at number 90, I had JT Romuto. Um, then Hunter Brown, Gabriel Moreno, Wilson Contreras, Jordan Westberg, Brendan Donovan, Mason Wynn, Wyatt Langford, Shane McClanahan, Willier Abreu, and then 80, Hunter Green, Sean Murphy, Luis Robert, Brenton Doyle, and then O'Neill Cruz. Um, that was those guys for me. Finn, I'll let you get the floor first. What do you what do you want to start with?
Ouch. What did Garrett Cole do here to go down negative 62 rankings?
Okay, so how I ranked pitchers. I think I discussed it in our honorable mentions episode. But Garrett Cole was a very good player in 2023. That being said, when I ranked players for 2024, I said, hey, Garrett Cole for the first time in his career, underperformed or overperformed his underlying data. He had a 2.6 ERA that year, but he had a 3.1 FIP, and then if you go based off of X, or if you go back based off of XFIP, he had a 3.6 XFIP. So that doesn't sound very good. And then this season, Garrett Cole had a 3.4 ERA and a 3.7 FIP, and then you know the velo is has dropped 2 miles per hour, 1 mile per hour over each season over the past 2 years. I'm looking at Garrett Cole and I'm kind of saying this guy might be over the hill at this point. And then I kind of penciled him in like I can be pretty uh, safe in saying that Garrett Cole is going to have, he might have 200 innings, but he'll probably have a 3.4. And then, like, that was the best case scenario for him. And a very likely situation is, like a 3.6 for him, especially if the velo continues to drop. I'm a little bit concerned about Garrett Cole, and then you add on the fact that he's starting to pile on injuries. Last season, he only pitched 95 innings because he had an injury that put him out until about July. I'm just a little concerned about Garrett Cole, and then his walk rates have, they went up last year. Um, they're still pretty good. He still has pretty good walk rates, but they took a significant increase from 2.07 to 2.75. So things just generally trending in the wrong direction with Cole, and I also do think his previous 2 years production aren't as impressive as they're made out to be. So that's Garrett Cole. Um, I guess next question for you, Finn.
So, obviously, when we were doing the top 50, I got this guy ranked in the top 50. Wilson Contreras. Would he have been ranked higher for you if he was still a catcher?
So previously, Wilson Contreras, as you can tell, he was a unranked guy for me. That was as a catcher. This year, he makes the transition to first base. Um, in previous seasons, Wilson Contreras was a 134 OPS plus, or WRC plus, and a 127 WRC plus. This past season, he was a 140. This is a guy who has been probably one of the worst defensive catchers, um, at least in the span that I've ranked him. I think he probably will be a good defensive first baseman, and I think his bat, is going to be better than a lot of other first basemen. I think he's going to be a rather good defender there. Um, I'd say being a good defensive first baseman is probably a little bit worse than a um, bad defensive catcher as far as positional value. Um, but I think if I was given the same numbers, I feel like he would have been around the same spot. I think the climb for him this year was because I do have a little bit more confidence in the bat now than I did before. Um, if he was still a catcher, he would obviously be a little bit higher. But he wouldn't. I don't think he would have really been that close to a top 50 guy for me, just because his catcher defense is so bad. So I'm assuming that answered where you were.
Yes, it did.
Okay. Um,
So, what is worse for you? A pitcher that has missed a season with the Tommy John, or a pitcher that was just god awful?
um, it depends. Um, I don't know if any god awful pitchers um from a year ago made my top 100. So, and Shane McClanahan was at 82. So, I guess that's the closest one that you got of either of those guys. So, I mean, McClanahan still, like, he didn't even pitch last year. Um, so I guess that's your answer. A guy who didn't pitch all year, because I still have the upside with them. And, I can still be a little concerned about the floor, but when McClanahan has pitched, like it's been, closer to a top 50. I mean, honestly, it has been a top 50 guy. So that's your answer. I mean, it really just depends on how good the injured pitcher is.
Obviously, a big climb for O'Neill Cruz. Why?
Okay, O'Neill Cruz is a very interesting case because um, mid-season, I'm sure you realized it. He made a switch to center field, and when it happened, I thought it was a temporary thing. So when I originally went through and ranked guys, O'Neill Cruz was a shortstop for me. But the Pirates are going to play him in center field. This was, you know, outside of his rookie season, this was his first full healthy season. Um, his X slug was a 460, and in his rookie season it was a 406. So there's been significant improvements with him. Hard hit rate is in the 97th percentile. I really do think like the floor for this guy is what just happened, which is a 107 WRC plus, and then like I do think there is significantly more ceiling with him, especially if he learns to just pull the ball a little bit more. Um, so I do think O'Neill Cruz like has the ceiling as a bat. Overall on the year, he was a -1 outs above average. Um, Once he transitioned, for context, he was 0 at shortstop. Oh, nope, he was -3 at shortstop and +2 in center field. So I do think that position change is a big reason for improvement on O'Neill Cruz. Um, I think the bad upside is 100% there. So like all the reason you were excited about him as a shortstop, except I do think his athleticism and arm strength probably plays even better in center than it does at shortstop. That's O'Neill Cruz. I'm really high on him. I think he's gonna have a great year next year.
I gotta tell you, still have the legs of Ozzy Albies in here. I'm not sure that I would.
Ozzy was tough. Um, so for me, after his really good 2023 season, I had him at about 88. The thing was, like, I didn't, I thought he got a little, lucky with his batted ball numbers. The thing is, though, I still do think the floor for Ozzy Albies is like a slightly above league average hitter. Like, I think a lot of the struggle for him this past season was kind of due to some injuries, and he for a moment he was only hitting right-handed. I think it was a really weird season for him, and I think the floor for him is like a 105 WRC plus, which is really good from the second base position. Um, so in a year where people are going to be traditionally low on Ozzy Albies, I think I'm the high guy here. Um, and that hasn't been the case ever really. I've always thought he's kind of an overrated player, but this year he might be kind of underrated this year. And yeah, having him at 98, I believe, is where I had him. I like him in that spot. I did feel like he's a guy who I should still include.
Do you think he'll be off going into 2026 if he somehow manages to have a worse season than 2024?
I'm gonna let you answer that one, Finn. What would you do in that situation?
I don't know how bad he actually did, though. If he was average.
Um. Oh, that's not my spreadsheet. For context, I think um he was he had a 95 WRC plus this past season, which relative to second baseman is 4% above average. So he was still an above average hitting second baseman.
So if he got
Um,
slightly worse, I could still see him being in there as long as he was at above average second baseman.
the thing with him though is he's not really a good defensive player. Um, consistently in the negative with outs above average. I think DRS feels pretty similarly about him. And then, base runner, he's a decent base runner, but I don't think if he dropped any lower that he would necessarily be a lock in guy for me. He'd be on the outskirts. Um, but his bat does play. Like he's a really good hitter for a second baseman. And I think this was just a weird year for him. I think he'll return to, you know, 10, 15% above league average. And then compared to second baseman, you know, that's going to generally be, let me find a good example. Um, yeah, for second baseman, that's going to be like 20% above average for second baseman. So that's how I feel about Ozzy Albies. I think he's good. Uh, he's not a perfect player, but he's still a guy who I wanted to rank.
Flores is interesting. How do you get there with him?
Yeah. Suarez. Okay. So I
Not
think I said,
necessarily have a problem with him being in your top 100, but I would have taken Arenado over him because I think they have similar bats, and I'd take Arenado defensively every day of the week.
yeah. So for me, I think bat wise, I trust Suarez more at this point. Um, I think is where we land here. I think I said in the video that came out was Suarez is a guy who production wise isn't that much dissimilar to his 2023 and 2022. Um, it's just that the right amount of guys fell off the list this season, and then yeah, Arenado, like, he slugged a 394 this past year, Finn. Like that's pretty rough. Um, his bat was still above average, um, but not by enough to where like he was a guy who definitely needed to be stamped in a spot for me. 2023 he had a 106 WRC plus. 2024 he had a 102. Third base, he gets some back, 107, 108 compared to third baseman. But Eugenio Suarez was a 115 in 2024. and was a 122 compared to third baseman. And I think if I had to look batted ball wise, I was more confident in Suarez repeating what he did. So, I mean, they're like three spots different from each other, but I would rather have Suarez, I think.
Is Suarez better defensively than you think people give him credit for?
I mean, hey,
I honestly
I'll,
think he's bad. That's what I'm asking.
you think he's bad?
Yeah.
Uh, plus 12 outs above average in 2023, plus 3 in 2024. He's pretty good. Um, he had been bad in 22. I think he was a neutral in 22, and then in his disaster 2021 season, he was a -9. But other than that, like he's been a really good player for a while. Like, yeah, he's still pretty good defensively. And I don't see him that much different than Arenado defensively, even though I would say Arenado's a better guy. Arenado was +9 this past season. In 2023, he was +5. So if you add those two totals up, Suarez is about the same. Um, Obviously, Arenado probably had a better 22 defensively. So I would still take Arenado as a glove. I just don't think the gap is that significant because I think his bat and his glove have both kind of regressed a lot.
That puts it into perspective.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't even a guy who you ranked either, so you probably weren't too much banking on Arenado. Um, but yeah, I guess I'm a Suarez truther right now.
How do you have Robert at 78 after that 2024?
Well, I think the thing with Robert is uh the -29 with him, which there's no way that's even the right number. Is it? Yeah, there's no way that's even right. It had to have been more than -29. Um, but yeah, I mean, the thing is, Finn, like going into last season, I had Robert ranked 22nd. So it might have, it should be like a -57, I think, or something like that, -50 something for Luis Robert. Clearly, this was a guy who, going into the year, had some merit. He drops a ton of spots. I think just his previous years keeps him on here. And the fact that he plays center field, and I don't think that's going to change, even though the results weren't that great last season. I'm still holding on for a season. If it's another season like the one he just had, like, yeah, we're packing him up and he's not showing up again on a list until he puts up a top 50 season. But, I'm banking on the bounce back. And then the past season was really hard. But I also had Bo Bichette in a similar boat, but I do think I like Robert a lot better defensively. And honestly, an 84 um, WRC plus isn't too bad compared to other center fielders. And like for context, over the past 3 seasons, he's been a 110 WRC plus, which compared to other center fielders is, a 113. So he's been good, and it's hard to knock him. And then like defensive value, um, you know, even with a horrible 2024, he's still a +10 defender. For in my glove plus metric, and he's an average runner, so he still had a decent profile for me. Um, yeah. Next thing, do you have a couple more?
Next thing is Brenton Doyle, who I believe had a similar bat to Luis Robert, even in Coors Field.
Yeah. So I mean, it wasn't similar. It was a lot better. Brenton Doyle had a 97 WRC plus. Compared to center fielders, it's a 98. Um, with him, he did take significant steps forward in his second season. Um, if y'all don't know what Brenton Doyle is good at, he win the platinum? He didn't win the platinum. Patrick Bailey did. But he had a plus 16 OOA this season, and then the year before, as a rookie, he had a plus 15. Um, I would say that the improvements he made this year showed in his underlying metrics. So I do think this is a guy who will hover around league average, and it's very possible he can make improvements as a 26-year-old in his third big league season. I think by Glove Plus he was ranked second. Yeah, he was ranked second, only behind Patrick Bailey, who just won the Platinum Glove this past season. He's up there with guys like Dansby Swanson, and then there's a significant gap to where you get to other Gold Glove caliber players. So Brenton Doyle is simply just like a top 3 defensive player for me. And I do kind of believe in the bat a little bit. And if you contrast it to other center fielders, I'm a little more confident in Robert and O'Neill Cruz's bats, but you know, I I place those 3 guys together because I think they're all gonna have similar outputs next year. So that's that guy, Brenton Doyle. I think he's awesome.
Why do you have Gray at 80 and Zach Gallen at like 94?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is Zach Allen had a significant down season this past year. Um, FIP still ended up being fine with him. It's just the innings were significantly down from before. Um, he's a guy who I do expect him to, his ERA to underperform his FIP, just because he, tends, um, relative to other players, his ground ball rates run closer to average versus good. And then, even hard hit wise, he hasn't been a darling in, surrendering or in preventing hard hit balls. So he's a guy who I would expect to outperform his FIPS. And then Hunter Green, I think, just has better strikeout stuff. Um, he also, he gets fly balls versus Gallon. It's a little bit more line drives, and Hunter Green just gets a little bit less or gets a little bit more strikeout stuff, and I think that's more predictive year to year uh, than Gallon. And you know, it's not so much an indoctrin or an indictment, not an indoctrin on Zach Gallen, but you know, Hunter Green a year ago, hard hit rate and the 92nd percentile, really good. Um, so if he's getting fly balls and not giving up hard hit fly balls, he's gonna have similar results to somebody who gets a lot of ground balls. And I started mentioning with the innings, Zach Gallen had 6 less starts this year than he did the year before. But it wasn't just a traditional loss of innings. Like the amount of innings he went per start was significantly lower, and a lot of that is a huge increase in walk per nine this past year. His walk per nine went up from a 2 to a 3.3, so that's a significant increasement. And then velocity wise, he stays the same, but I do have a little bit more concerns about Gallon going forward versus the year prior. I was ranking him off of a 4.2 F4 and then a 5.2 F4 as the 2 prior seasons. This year he's coming off of a 2.8, which honestly wouldn't have been a top 100 season last year. It might have been towards the back half where he is now, but short answer, Hunter Green gets weak contact and strikes guys out. Zach Gallen gives up hard contact and strikes guys out a lot less. And walk wise, they are about the same now. So I significantly trust Hunter Green more.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, the Gallon fall off surprised me. I didn't realize he had been significantly worse. Um, if he gets right back in the strike zone next year, though, no issue to boost him back up. Because he's always given up some hard contact. It's just this year, kind of similar to what you had on Pablo Lopez, where you know behind in counts a little too often. It's kind of where Zach Gallen is, not allowing him to go as deep into games as he possibly could. Um, and that's where a lot of his value comes from. Do you have any other ones?
I don't.
Okay, so that'll do it for this episode. This was a pretty fun one. We went through two of our lists, at least the start of mine, and my the rest of my list will be coming out incrementally over the next 2 weeks. So that should be fun. I cannot wait for meme comments on those videos. I'm sure Finn is very much anticipating meme comments that he will not see because I run the channel, and I won't tell him about the meme comments. I'll tell him about the nice ones. Um, yeah, Finn, do you have any wrapping up comments?
No, other than I'm thinking of doing an international signing short.
We'll talk about that in a second. Just say no.
No.
All right. Next week's episode will be my next 25 names, and then we're going to talk about free agents that have signed. It should be a fun episode. We're going to recap moves that have happened over the past, honestly, a month now. It feels like since we've done a recap episode. Yeah, that should be a fun one. This should be going out on a Thursday. There will be an NBA episode coming out on Saturday, so you'll have fun with that one.